Hello and welcome to Crossfaded, a podcast about the business and the culture of cannabis, CBD, and alcohol. Cannabis and alcohol are both multi-billion-dollar industries that are highly regulated from an advertising standpoint. So we built FlavorFix.com to help brands reach these audiences and grow. And Crossfaded is some flavor in your ear to inspire you to make money in these industries now that legalization is finally happening. In this episode, we catch up with Cody Stevenson, head of biz dev of Ganjaprenuer.com and CEO of their Blue Dream agency, to talk about how to get into cannabis and to grow a cannabis and CBD brand, and why partnering with a cannabis industry nonprofit organization is one of the first things you should do when you're getting into the industry. Enjoy. All right, so you wanna kick things off?
Yeah, I'm good, man.
Awesome. Yeah. So welcome to the show. So as you know, we launched Flavor Fix and the Crossfaded podcast to really help people really learn about the business and the culture of CBD, alcohol, and cannabis, right? These are all multi-billion-dollar industries that are super highly regulated from an advertising standpoint. So this is our attempt to really help people connect with these industries and really navigate it. And I think me coming into this industry, I followed Ganjaprenuer, and I really got to get a sense of what's going on. So we're excited to have you introduce yourself and tell us about how you got into the cannabis industry.
Yeah, so like you said, my name's Cody. I am the director of business development at Ganjaprenuer and the CEO of Blue Dream, which is the in-house creative web development and branding agency at Ganjaprenuer. And back in 2014, I was really trying to figure out what my next journey was going to be. And at the time, I was also kind of reuniting with cannabis and realizing how helpful it could be for veterans, because I'm a veteran. And I noticed that cannabis was really helping veterans that were returning from deployment. That's when I decided I was going to go all in on cannabis. Back then, I couldn't really find anything in the industry that kind of fit my talents. I did a lot of searching around on the web, and I would come across, I don't even remember the names of the websites anymore, but they were kind of really distasteful. There was a lot of websites with like barely dressed women with like fan leaves hiding their body parts, and it was like, be a bud tender. And I was like, that's not really for me. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm more of, on the tech side of things and everything. And I was just having a really hard time trying to figure out how to break into the industry. So the first thing that I did was I created a job board called Kush Jobs, which ended up being a whole hiring platform. And I geared that more towards bringing, tech professionals, and other type of professionals into the industry that were interested in cannabis. And then through that, I met a lovely woman, Bianca Green. She ran a nonprofit called Spark the Conversation. And this was shortly before legalization was going to happen in California. And she asked me if I would be interested in coming on board and kind of leading, the branding, the web development, and really just kind of the whole project, which we ended up spending 4 weeks going all over California leading up to legalization and just educating people on the plant, not even really telling them what to do. We were pretty agnostic on telling them how they should vote. We were just going all over California, working with universities, working with various companies within the state, and just educating people on cannabis. And through that is how I actually met the original founder and CEO of Ganjaprenuer, Noel Abbott. That's how we got connected. And, that's kind of what got me to where I am today.
Got it. And so just on the veteran thing, so do you think the cannabis industry is a good place for veterans? There's a lot of people who are coming back from Afghanistan right now, and there's two things. If they're retiring, what do they do? And there's also, I did a lot of work running these military audience networks, and one of them was focused on military spouses, and that whole community. I learned that mil spouses, like, that's one of the most underemployed, and not by choice, but underemployed population in America. So do you see cannabis as sort of a good industry for them to get into?
Yeah, I think cannabis is, one of the best industries veterans can get into, spouses and veterans. We'll get into this more later in the conversation, but I do think there's an aspect of cannabis that is, it holds a lot of brotherhood.
Hmm.
A big problem for a lot of veterans coming back is trying to acclimate back into society.
All right.
And so, like a lot of veterans do, I did myself, a long time ago, is we turned to the bottle,
Hmm.
and we kind of drink that away, and just have difficulty acclimating back to society. Cannabis helps that. It helps a lot. It kind of, for me anyways, it slowed me down, and it also made me not get so worked up about issues that I had from the time that I served.
All right.
But because of that, because of what the plant can do for veterans and so many other people with PTSD, I think cannabis is a great industry for veterans to work in, and I think they can do really good work in it. And I've been in the industry 6-7 years now, and I've met so many companies within the industry that are veteran owned and ran, and they're doing really good stuff in the industry. And I think we need more people like that kind of understand the difficulties of acclimating back into society, because we have people, which I know we're going to get into this. We have people that are in prison for petty crimes that have a hard time acclimating society. And I'm not comparing them to veterans, but veterans, understand that. So they're very sympathetic to that. And I think they can help a lot in this industry.
That's awesome. I think as a takeaway, we should do something cool around veterans. I think I think that's awesome. And my relationship with cannabis is, I have PTSD, and not from military, but from trauma, getting stabbed in Brooklyn. I was fighting and stuff as a kid. But that trauma, you don't realize comes with you. And so I couldn't sleep because I'd have these crazy nightmares, and I had to go to therapy. And that recommendation of, you should try this, and it really sort of allowed me to sleep, and actually changed my life. So yeah, no, I totally understand that. And yeah, and so one of the things I wanted to know, I was like, what I found is getting into this industry, finding people like yourself and companies like Ganjaprenuer really helped guide my thinking and how I maneuvered in the space. And I follow like Sean Stevenson. I hope I didn't butcher his last name, but he's the CEO of Navy Capital, and like, he's on the board of Grow Generations, and he invested in Adult Bev, the can products, and like, he's very spot on his thesis, and just listening to him really helped me guide my thesis for Flavor Fix and hone in on the cannabis beverages infused and CBD infused. I think that's going to be a whole new market. But following him is how I sort of landed on there. Two or three people that you recommend, or even companies that you recommend people sort of attach themselves to and follow as they start their journey into the industry.
Ooh, put me on the spot, man. Two or three companies that I reckon, I really think that people need to spend more time with really understanding the community and giving time, nonprofit time. So the Last Prisoner Project is one that I think everybody should focus on and give some time to. I was not aware of this until your first episode with Master P, but the 520 movement. I think that's a great movement that people should get involved in. But I don't feel like a lot of brands are doing good work in this industry. I think we could do a lot better. So many people, especially right now in this industry, so many people are focusing on getting market share and building the biggest brands. And I get that. I totally get that. At my core, I'm an entrepreneur. I love business.
Mm-hmm.
But I also came into this industry because I thought this industry would be different from everybody else. I thought that we could, set an example on how an industry could be. And unfortunately, I don't see that happening. I really don't. Obviously, there's good people in this industry doing good things. There's a lot of good people in this industry. But I feel like that is getting shadowed by, and maybe this is just a byproduct of how the industry works with all these different states and all these different regulations within states. Maybe once it goes federally legal, we can stop all this silliness and actually focus on doing good. But I don't know if that will happen. I just think we really need to take a step back. I think we need to look at what we're doing, how we're approaching it, and more importantly, give back to the people that sacrificed before this was legal. You and Master P talked about it. There are a lot of people that are in jail for having a dime bag, something like that. That makes me sick. That isn't common sense. It doesn't make sense. And it drives me nuts every day. And I wish we would focus more on that.
Yeah, no, and I read, and I sent Master P the article that I read on your site about I think in New Orleans they decriminalized it and then dismissed like 100,000 cases, which is just incredible, right?
Yep.
So as soon as I saw that, I was like, "You're doing the God's work, Master P. This is amazing."
Yeah.
One thing that I really love about Ganjaprenuer is, and I want to talk to you about Blue Dream too, because I think your business structure, I literally saw that and I was like, we have to do the same thing because I run a growth marketing agency, but the cannabis Flavor Fix is the publishing side of that business where we're growing the audience. So tell me about like, and I just have to say thank you. Like, when I a lot of people are full of it, and in this industry I think there's a lot of that too. And when you approach a publishing platform like yours, you're sort of like, I'm going to invest X amount of dollars into this buy, and then you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen, right? And I've seen this play out where brands talk to the salesperson, the sell guy sells them a dream, they do the buy, and then they get nothing. It's just vapor,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my experience with you was excellent. I was like, yeah, this is incredible. So every time that, and everyone on your team is amazing, but in doing those buys, like we saw the results, and I'm like, wow, our email list exploded, traffic exploded, like all the things that you'd want from a brand standpoint really, really, really worked. So anyone listening, if you're trying to grow a brand, especially B2B within this industry, Ganjaprenuer is the place you need to go. Because and we're gonna do another one, so I'll talk to you another buy with you. I'll talk to you about that. But the point is that kudos to you to building something and running something that's super effective and that actually works, and you're not gonna like take someone's money and waste their time. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks very much, man. That means so much. But, I think something to point out in that conversation is, thank you as well, because it is to make all of that work. We at Blue Dream or us at Ganjaprenuer, we can create marketing campaigns and we can send all the traffic, do anything that we can to, boost your brand. But at the end of the day, it takes teamwork, and it takes, you having the ability to know how to funnel that traffic and what to do with it and converting it. So, thank you for having an amazing platform. Thank you for all the cool things that you guys produce. I've talked to you about it many times, and me and Katie both love the handmade wood products that you guys put together. I think that's so unique and so cool. But it takes things like that to convert traffic. And you can, not anybody can just run ads and then know what to do with that traffic. So I guess my point is thank you for being a great advertiser to work with. And I'm really looking forward to our relationship going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And the point on the wooden items, like, when you look at, we didn't want to create a spam site that has all the same information that everyone else is, right? Our information is different, but we saw it as a unique standing point because there's a bunch of low quality wooden plastic items basically out there, and then fake wood. So, we wanted to do right by anyone who runs into the brand. Our goal is to add flavor to their life. So having a cutting board and a rolling tray, those things add flavor to your life. You could look cool when you're hosting guests and all of that thing. Our symbol even means it's AVO, it's balance, it's umami. So these things add flavor, right? So I appreciate that. And then so from a Blue Dream standpoint, what I've figured out too is like no one knows what they're doing really in cannabis. And you pointed that out from a marketing standpoint, just from the basics, right? And so tell me about how you're helping people and that structure in Blue Dream, because and then just let's go get into like the top 3 things you think a brand could do right now to really get ahead in cannabis.
Yeah, for sure. So through Blue Dream, we are a web development and branding agency. We build everything from the ground up. We don't build on top of themes or anything like that, like a lot of other agencies do. Due to that, we are a little bit higher tier in price because we are custom developing everything. But the other unique aspect of Blue Dream is we have that Ganjaprenuer element. I don't know a lot of agencies within the space that also run one of the largest publications within the space. So while we're working with brands, we can utilize our audience to either do market research or do what we need to do to provide that brand with the best strategy. Cannabis is difficult, and that's one of the things I like about it. It's not as cut and dry as most industries. You can't just take this cookie cutter approach and be like, all right, I'm going to do this Instagram page. I'm going to do this Facebook account, whatever it may be. Like you can't do that in cannabis. One, you just can't advertise on those platforms. So you have to get creative. And I think one of the ways to do that is through earned media. And by earned media, I don't mean that you have a PR agency that sends tons of press releases out to all the publications, hoping that your press release is going to get picked up. I mean, actually putting thought and intention into your story and your brand and figuring out, how can you be unique? How can you do something different that everybody else isn't doing? That way, our writers and all the other writers within the industry, you just stand out to them. You don't have to have a PR agency reaching out to these writers. The writers are going to find you. You shouldn't even need a PR agency, to be honest with you. Like if you're doing it right, you don't need a PR agency. Outside of earned media, just by the nature of this industry, paid media is important within this industry. And by paid media, I mean, obviously placing advertisements, but on the right platforms. At Ganjaprenuer, we're B2B focused. A lot of brands within the space we might not be the right fit for, but there are other publications out there that are doing great work. If you have a dispensary, I encourage people to look at Marijuana Venture. They do a lot of great work. Flavor Fix. There are so many companies out there doing things that you can do paid media with. And just evaluate them and pick the right ones that make sense to you. Reach out to them, see how responsive they are to getting back to you, and see what they can provide for you. But paid media is another way to go. And then the third, I guess, would be organic content. I believe in really strong organic content. That's pretty much how we grew at Ganjaprenuer. We are really good at SEO. We're really good at creating content, and that's how we grew from the early days until now. We've actually never really spent any money outside of giving to nonprofits and doing things like that. We've never spent any money on advertising. We've just organically grown throughout the years. So back to the earned media, tell a really good story, but do that with your own content. I'm a big believer, and especially with consumer focused brands, having in-house content creators because you can't hire an agency that's across the country to tell the story of your grow or your dispensary. You need somebody there creating that content, and then somebody that knows how to get it out to the masses. Just to point somebody out that I think is real unique and doing something different. And obviously he has, the status of being a celebrity behind him. But Seth Rogen's new brand, Houseplant,
Yep.
I think is so neat and interesting from a branding and marketing standpoint, because they're taking a very different approach. It's almost like a decor and paraphernalia company, and the flower and the grow is like second to it.
Right.
I mean, the guy selling turntables and stuff. I have right. I don't even have a turntable.
That's
This
hilarious.
is the first LP I've ever bought, and I bought it because I thought it was such a cool idea.
That's great. Yeah.
But so that's just an example of being different and making yourself stand out.
Absolutely. What I really loved how you kick that off is that the regulations are a challenge, and they're not like, oh my God, I can't do this, it's so hard. And I love that approach, because it's the same thing in alcohol. I ran Remy and Diageo. It's the same thing. Like, it's hard to spend on Google and Facebook, which when you think about it, is just like, that's like the easiest thing to do. So I really love the authenticity of building your brand and your story. And I think one of the things that we do too, I'm like SEO is my craft, right? And SEO leads into content, and that's how we built that's what I do for a living, and we built Flavor Fix on. And when I looked at the cannabis industry, I was very surprised at how pretty easy it is to compete, right? I'm also like working with clients who are fighting in like the crypto space and it's impossible. It's like that, like crypto is so hard to rank for.
Yep.
Like the finance, those guys. And the reason why is because companies like NerdWallet got in there really, really quickly early on and just did what we literally talking about. That's all they did. All they did was hire an internal content team. Maybe they outsourced some of it for scale. They did SEO and they produced that stuff. And then now they're the biggest affiliate and company in that marketplace. And you see that with Bankrate, NerdWallet, all those guys. TripAdvisor is just another example of it. And and I would even argue that like Leafly and those guys started that way. That's what they did, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think your advice is spot on. What do you think now about like the UN? I keep seeing blips of like pushback on the advertising cannabis, right? And the way like the UN, what they said was in United Nations, they're basically like, look, this is like tobacco, so we want to regulate it like tobacco because gummies are like appealing to kids, so they're trying to push it and regulate it like that. And I forgot what state rolled something out recently. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I'm a really transparent guy, and I'll be completely honest. I don't put a lot of thought into organizations like the UN when it comes to cannabis recommendations. That's all they are, is recommendations. And those people are influenced by the same people that lobby governments to keep cannabis illegal. It's all about money and who can donate to their cause. Cannabis, is still small. We are in the first inning of a very long game that will play out long after you and I are gone, man. Like, maybe one day we will be so big, we will have influence on these powers, and then they will say only cannabis, psychedelics, and other natural plant-derived medicines are allowed to advertise to the public. That would be cool. But that's kind of how I look at those organizations and, the federal government. Everybody's always like, when's cannabis going to be federally legal? And I'm like, once we get the money out of the companies that are supporting the politicians, and this is both sides of the aisle,
right?
Like, there are companies that don't want cannabis legal because it's going to hurt their bottom line. And that's the same way I look at the UN, making these recommendations. I just don't put a lot of thought into it. I put my head down. I keep going after what I'm going after. I keep trying to make the industry a better place. And, like I said, man, it's early stages. Like, a lot of things are going to change.
That's awesome. Yeah. that's the best advice. No anxiety. Just keep it moving. Keep doing what you love, and you're having fun doing that. I respect. I admire that, and I'm going to take that advice. So on the note in terms of what's happening, what's coming next, like what trends are you seeing in cannabis?
I don't want to be negative, but at this moment, I'm not seeing anything that really impresses me. Like I'm seeing, you know what the trends are I'm seeing in cannabis right now? I'm seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of lack of understanding on how to provide good customer experience, and a lot of people fighting for market share. Like I mentioned earlier, I got into cannabis because I really thought it would be a different industry, one that could lead by example and show other industries how to operate. I just see companies getting bigger while not giving back to the communities that sacrificed everything and believed in cannabis when it wasn't legal.
Mm-hmm.
If you go on Twitter, you will see industry influencers, complaining about things like THC limits. How many edibles can you buy at once? Things like that. How about highlighting the numerous people that are still behind bars because they had a dime bag on them?
Yeah.
Like those, and sadly and unfortunately, those are the trends I'm seeing in cannabis. I'm not seeing a lot of companies breaking out and bringing something to market that is just groundbreaking. I'm seeing a ton of people try to get as much market share as they can. I'm seeing larger companies come in as more states go legal and buying those companies. And like those aren't the trends I want to see.
Right.
But as I mentioned earlier, and I'm sorry, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but that's just what I'm seeing. I want to see us give back more. I want to see this industry set an example, and I just don't see us doing that right now.
And then on that topic, we talked about Master P's 520 movement, and that's basically, for those who don't know, it is 520, just 420. Everyone knows what that is, but 520 is to acknowledge and push. It's Freedom Day. It's to push the decriminalization of people who've been locked up for cannabis related crimes that are non-violent and all of that. And the young man that Master P mentioned basically got sentenced to life for a 20 bag in his state, and they've fixed a lot of that, right? Not in his situation, but he got out and he unfortunately passed. But we just mentioned that New Orleans acted, they decriminalized and then dropped a bunch of cases, but there's a ton of other people in different states. And so do you think that these conglomerates that are buying up, the companies have an obligation to sort of help push these reforms?
Yeah, I do think they have an obligation. Do they do that? I don't believe so. But I think we all have an obligation. I think anybody coming into cannabis in any form, I think the very first thing they should do is spend some time working with a nonprofit. Choose what nonprofit you want that to be, but also educating yourself on the history of cannabis.
Hmm.
I think that's just a need, and I do think that these companies have an obligation, and I wish that they recognized that and would give back more. And you know what? Maybe they are, and I'm just not seeing it. But I think that would be kind of odd with, just by the nature of my position and what I do. I talk to people in the industry all day, every day long.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I do every morning is I go through an inbox of 100 plus emails that are mainly press releases, people reaching out trying to get free coverage. Very rarely in those emails do I find people that are doing good things within the industry.
Hmm.
They're just saying, look at my brand, look what I'm doing, we're the best. We created the next groundbreaking pre-roll. No, you didn't. It's like like that's what I
No,
see
buddy.
every day. A big push of ours at Ganjaprenuer, as we grow and we get more people on board, and it's not just 4 or 5 of us trying to run this whole thing, is bringing in editors like our cultural editor Kara. She's
Great.
focused on, and she's focused on going out and finding the companies and the brands and the people that are supporting underprivileged communities, people that were locked up for no good reason at all, and highlighting that. So that's what we're trying to do. That's what I would like to see other brands trying to do. But like I said, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong and this is going on all over the place and I just don't see it, but I don't see it.
No, and honestly, like you've this podcast has basically changed one of the pillars that we're gonna start focusing on, and you've inspired me because I also didn't think about that, right? Like and I think it's absolutely like the one takeaway anyone should take away from this whole call is to start with a nonprofit and partnering because you're gonna learn a different side of this business, and the history I think which is most important. I'm literally gonna reach out to the Last Prisoner Project, and see how we could support because I think you hit the spot. Like that's amazing. So that's good, but I think it's like us who are gonna push these trends and make sure we should build like a list of people or companies that support because I think one thing people might say is like, okay, so who do I go support? Where are you? How do I find these companies? I think so.
Yeah.
If we remove that as an excuse, I think that's a first place to start, right? But no,
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's a great point. For us to highlight these companies because they are so far and few between. And that's one position that we're in where we can help. Both of us is we have platforms that have large audiences, and we can say, go look at these organizations. They're doing good work. One thing that we did last year is we launched oregano.com, a satire site for the cannabis
I read that.
industry.
That thing is hilarious.
Thanks, man. Thanks. But
That is
the
so
focus,
good.
the whole focus of it is to obviously drive traffic to the site using satire content that's kind of poking fun at the funny things in the industry. But
Mhm.
it's also a platform to push people to the Last Prisoner Project. We teamed up with them when we launched that.
That's
And
cool.
and that's all the content always directs people to go donate to the Last Prisoner Project, try to work with them in some capacity. But those are just various things people can do. If anybody's listening and they like satire and you're a writer that likes satire, feel free to reach out to us. We're always looking for good writers at Oregano that would just want to give back to the community.
I don't even want to talk about adult bev because I want to end it there. Seriously, I don't because I think like I think what you just said is the most important thing. And I want to leave people with that thought that they really need to get in and focus on helping and working with these nonprofits to get a sense of what's happening to the communities and then sort of start telling their story and then and obviously use the techniques the earned media like you mentioned to grow their brands because again it's super difficult to actually pay to reach this audience. Any final thoughts?
Um, thanks for having me on, man. I'm really flattered, and I got to follow Master P, which is amazing to me. I feel I feel like that's one of my things I'm going to talk about throughout life. Now, I went on a podcast and I was the guy after Master P. Like,
Yeah,
I grew up listening to Master P and stuff, man.
pretty
Like, he
funny.
was the dude, like, for me back in like high school and everything. Like
Yeah,
and like that was I watched that whole episode and that was really cool. And I thought it was really cool that he came on and spoke to you and like that 520 movement. That I'm really glad that he's doing that and there's people out there doing that.
absolutely.
I just really want to really hammer home. I think if you're coming into the industry, really look at a nonprofit, and not only because we should all be giving back to the industry, and just the plant in general, but because I'm not a perfect person, and I had my thoughts about how this industry would be one way or the other when I first came into it. And I just happened to get linked up with a nonprofit at a very early stage in my journey in cannabis. And from that point forward, that kind of changed my perspective moving forward and how I was going to do business within the space.
Hmm.
And that's why I think that aspect of coming into the industry is so important, because you might learn something that kind of changes your trajectory in a better way.
That's amazing. Yep, we're gonna leave it just at that.